So I recently got into a small spat online concerning ORMs. And personally, I think ORMs, that is object relational mappers, are some of the least useful tools that exist if you can choose your own database. And the other guy disagreed, fair enough. To be fair, I haven't worked on projects where ORMs really shine. I've built medium to small projects where I've seen why other tools shine. I understand why React shines, why Fast API shines, and Tailwind. Tailwind is like, oh my gosh, Tailwind is so beautiful. I think the only reason which I hated frontend so much was because I just try to raw dog CSS every single time, just raw dog HTML, CSS, and try and create a beautiful site. But with all these abstractions, it makes stuff easier. But why do I not like abstractions, or how did we get to this point in the conversation? Well, it's because I'm a person who idealizes mastery. And that's how the argument actually started. I think that mastery is really underrated, to be honest. And especially in this day and age with I think mastery is really underrated because in the next 5 years, mastery is really going to pay its dividends, in my opinion. So I idealize mastery, and that's how the argument started. I said that I'd rather understand something deeply than rely on abstractions. And to be honest, for SQL, I do get the point behind ORMs, or I think I get the point. I think it's so that you don't have to learn all these 1 million different dialects of SQL. But SQL itself is so difficult such that you'd need an abstraction. So if I had my pick of the litter, then I wouldn't use an ORM. But at the same time, no one cares. VS Code, Cursor, Vim, NeoVim, no one cares. Claude, OpenAI, Arch, Windows, no one cares. The only question that matters is, do you complete your projects and do you provide value? That is literally all that matters. Okay, let's do a thought experiment. What do these people have in common? Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, DHH, Linus Torvalds. Well, some of them were CS majors. Actually, most of them were CS majors. Elon wasn't. I forget that. Bezos was. I also forget that. But almost all of them made something semi-useful before their big break. Something niche, fun, or genuinely useful. So let's do a quick rundown. Zuck built a bunch of stuff. He made an ML media player. He made a software to connect his home computer to the computer in his dad's office. And he also built two social networks. So one of them was Face Smash, and the other one I know he made in high school. I don't know what its name was, but all of this was before Facebook. So actually, by the time he was entering university, he was known to be a proficient programmer. So DHH, he only learned programming later in life, if I remember correctly. But when he was 14, he ran a bulletin board for the Amiga demo scene. And I can only imagine what this was. I assume it was like a very basic, rudimentary type of website. And yeah, they trade pirated games on there. Gates made a scheduling program for his school, and he had a data collection business with Paul Allen. Elon sold a video game for $500 when he was a teen. Linus was modifying operating systems at like 12 years old and writing his own assemblers. So we have to ask ourselves, what have we ever built or sold to someone? Or what have we ever made that was actually used by even one person, even just ourselves? Of course, there's always luck involved. Being born in a peaceful country, having loving parents. Um, what else is there? Yeah, having the monetary means. And that's all true, but in my opinion, just doing something is the most important factor. A good question to ask yourself is, what does it actually cost you? And when we think about people like Zuckerberg, etc., we like to think, hey, great timing, and someone had to get it. And sure, but what if we peel the layers back and actually look at the facts? They were doing stuff from a very young age, involved in software from a very young age, and quite skilled also at a very young age. What if I told you that Paul Allen, the co founder of Microsoft, at 22 years old, was working as a director of software at a company earning 170K in 1976? Like, of course, as well, 170K adjusted for inflation, that is. And it's like, just think about that. That was 1976. Software was still being written on punch cards. And Paul Allen drops, and also, of course, also Bill Gates later, but they drop out of college, both at prestigious universities, drop out of college to just write software. And even at this point, they'd already written quite a lot of software. At 14, they got banned from using a computer because they were finding bugs so that they could get more compute time. Like, it's really funny. And, I bet none of you, or, well, not many of you, or perhaps many of you have heard of the first iterations of Facebook that Mark Zuckerberg had made uh, two social media sites previously. Of course, everyone has heard about Face Mash. I think that one is pretty known, but he made another one in high school. And maybe, or I bet none of you have heard about Sam Altman's failed social media platform called Looped. So that was a social media platform that didn't acquire a significant amount of users, but at the same time, it was still acquired for $43 million. So you ever notice how some people just fail upwards? So obviously, Looped wasn't a hit. Sam Altman is doing pretty well with OpenAI. Even for Bill Gates, the partnership, the software which he dropped out of college for, which he licensed um, to a company. So there was a company that was selling the software and paying royalties back to Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Well, that company went under. So at the end of the day, they didn't really get that the amount of royalties that they assumed that they'd get. But stuff still went well for them. And the thing is that doing something and not having it go perfectly is better than doing nothing at all. And waiting for the perfect time to strike, waiting for the moment where you lock in, that's just wasting time. Thinking that one day you'll suddenly have all the skills and all the confidence that you need is self deception. You either start now or you never start. And know that the person who starts and tries, even if it's not perfect, even if it's ugly, is 10 times better off than the person who hasn't done. Like, honestly, have you ever sold a software tool? Have you ever made a proper project? Have you ever completed anything that a single user, including yourself, has ever used? Now, I don't want to put such a focus on selling software. So, yeah, have you ever created a software that a single user, including yourself, has used? Because the truth is, right now with AI, if you're not doing so, I or if you haven't yet, I don't really think that you're going to make it, because learning is a part of doing, sure, but AI has made building extremely easy. And and while you're sitting there waiting, memorizing every single lead code, and I love lead code, don't get me wrong, but while you're sitting there wasting your time in lead code and learning every aspect of OS and networking, there's a 14-year-old out there who just got $200 million in funding to build his app. And you know what? No one cares what is actually happening in the background. It could literally be held together by duct tape. Nobody cares. The investors do not care. And all they care about is all they care about is the value that it provides. Of course, they care about costs and stuff like that. And yeah, yada yada, that can be influenced by what's going on in the background. But even the first iteration of Facebook, I bet the site wasn't like so perfectly optimized. Stuff doesn't need to be perfect in the first iteration. It's much more important that it even exists. And while you're waiting, there are some non-technical person using this app by this 14-year-old to make uncreative AI generated sites that they're still selling for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And why? Because no one cares about the technology. All they care is about the problem that it's fulfilling and the value that your app provides. I mean, literally, I'll show you something, but look at this website. Somebody has made 250K off of selling one of the websites in this portfolio, and this is their portfolio website. It's like I don't need to say much more. And while you're, while you and I, by the way, are living, while you and I are living like brokies, singing "Kumbaya," investors are throwing money at anything, and it seems that those who are most primed to take advantage of it have just logged off and are like crying because they can't get an internship. So again, nobody cares how you build. You'll, and I mean, of course, I don't think that getting a job, getting an internship is anything bad. But I think you're going to learn something regardless while building. And as long as it works and is useful to someone, that's extremely important. Uh, if it works and if it is useful, that's in my opinion way better than just wasting your time on lead code. Although lead code also teaches you something, it's all about balance, you know. So something else that you have to realize is this, what I call this over dependence on companies. Or let me not say over dependence on companies. You still need to do business with companies. You still need to do business with individuals. But this over reliance on employment, as if CS wasn't the easiest place for you to do your own thing. Like, what, literally, what field is it easier to make a software and to sell it? And you look at the software that's outside there. Like, look at the software that's making hundreds of millions yearly. Look at software like anything that Atlassian provides. It's literally just, or SAP is literally management software, man. It's not the most complicated. It's not like some complicated as algorithms that are behind this. It's literally just making good software for a use case. And that's the thing. That's an interesting thing about software. Software has a nigh infinite demand. And it's about time we realize it. You know, your local shop around the corner probably needs a website or some form of rudimentary ERP or inventory management software, or just some software to allow employees to easily track their hours. There are so many places where you could be creating software and you could be extracting value from the economy, and of course, creating value for the economy yourself without having to rely on someone else. Like, if you're a CS grad who's graduated and in 2 years you weren't able to find a job, or in a year or so, in that time you could have built, in my opinion, like really great software, at least like one really great software, at least one project that's actually used. So, and I think like if you didn't, then that's like what are you going to do about it? About it? Like cry about it? No, we have to move ahead. We have to move forward and do the next thing. So I'm just basically I'm trying to get y'all to clock that it's extremely easy to not extremely easy to create software, but there's a very high demand for software. And I think it's easier to exploit this demand than we realize. And that's what browsing the lovable subreddit has shown me, honestly. I know some people do it, like even in my circle. I know there are people who make websites, who sell software on, but let's say a freelance basis. But I think I myself kind of like closed my eyes to this opportunity. And I think many CS majors, CS grads close their eyes to such opportunities. And even if you're like, oh, why should I do this? Such a software exists already. So what? Like half of the industry is just like making the same software again and again because we have something that we think consumers would like. Google wasn't the first search engine, Facebook wasn't the first social media site. You can reinvent the wheel and just change something about it. The honest question you have to ask yourself is, how am I providing value? Is it true value? And that's why your calculator app that you're using to learn CS, what am I talking about? To learn back and front end is completely useless because who is it providing, who gets any value from that app? There's nothing that you can do in that regard. There's nothing that I can think of. Well, of course, there's stuff like, the Microsoft calculator, that you can just take photos of stuff and it calculates it. That's incredibly useful. So if you're doing something like that, why not? And hey, I just talked about just not reinventing the wheel. So why not? But you have to have like some sort of value proposition in whatever software you create. And let's try and create software with not as just a, like, even when we are learning, not just as a means to an end being the learning. Let's actually try and create like beautiful software and software that has a use, software that at least we will use. I think that's a great challenge for us. And if you're creating such software, I also think that you hold yourself to a higher standard because you're not going to just like leave it half finished if you actually get some use from it. So because AI tools exist, we have to realize that it's been easier than ever to create software. And for many of us who were just severely not going to make it in the past, you actually have a chance. And you have a chance because the curve of expertise has inverted basically. It used to be an exponential curve that expertise makes you like exponentially better than somebody who's not an expert. But that has actually kind of reverted. These days, I believe that that the curve is more logarithmic. Of course, there's still a lot of value. It's not completely logarithmic. There's still a lot of value in expertise and mastery, but I think especially at the lower levels, as somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, it's really easy to get your app off the ground, and really easy to get your app off the ground for cheap, for really cheap. You can just rent a server for like $10. And to be fair, I haven't deployed anything, so I don't know what like long term, or haven't deployed anything that's gotten any users. So I don't really know what long term hosting costs are, but I think it's easier than ever. Yeah, the investment that you have to put in is really minimal. So why not do that? And maybe the reason that people don't do it is because they want, like, they think it's stupid. They want honorable work. They're thinking about that job that they want to get, that FAANG job. That's the only thing that they can think of. And I think that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting a job like that. Like, hey, you get paid, you have one of the highest salaries in the world in that case, if you get such a job. But I think sometimes you stifle yourself and you don't let your creativity flow. And yeah, you really stifle yourself. Yeah. You could be creating some great software that only you own, the software that you own, that you get all the benefits from when you sell it. But I just think about all the people working in Silicon Valley. For sure, there are people who write their own software there. And I figured that they have also hustles on the side. And maybe at that level, is it really even worth it to hustle when you have a pretty good salary? Maybe your hustle is just like keeping your job and like reading engineering books. But I think there's a lot of software to be created. There's so much software to be created, and you shouldn't stifle yourself, and you should really try and do stuff apart from lead code and create like really cool stuff. And you're probably capable of more than you're willing to admit yourself. And once you realize how easy it is to do some stuff, you're going to be so motivated. The ideas will just flow out of your head, and you're just going to be so much more capable at implementing them. And on top of that, you have no one to answer to but yourself. You can take as much time as you want with your project. You can literally you can make the project perfect. You can put in as much detail as you want. It's only for you. You can launch when it's perfect and when it's beautiful. And software has like basically no costs apart from apart from the time that you put in, which I think is pretty beautiful. It's a pretty egalitarian field. So overall, I'd say that, yeah, as I've said severally in this video, success has nothing to do with locking in. Like, sure, locking in can help, and but overall, it's just a numbers game. The more you do, the more likely you are to succeed. And I think that you need something to show people. Often, in CS, like it's the internships that you want to get. You want to get internships so that you can show your when you're applying, hey, I've done this internship in the past. But honestly, hot take, but I think that projects with the users are so much better than internships. Like infinitely better. Because if it was me, if I was hiring managers, feel free to disagree in the comments. But if I was a hiring manager, I'd much more want someone who is creative as a junior dev, who, yeah, who is creative, because I think they just have more potential somehow. They have more potential to bring the company value in the long run, more than someone who has just worked in a company structure. Because at the end of the day, as a company, you're going to spend resources training the person. So I just like to see somebody who's done interesting stuff, who has an attention to detail, who creates stuff with the user in mind. And hey, best case scenario, you create these side hustles or these projects, and at the end of the day, they actually bring in like some money on the side. You can't like That's pretty amazing. It leaves you flexible. It leaves you able to work properly and to even learn properly sometimes, for some of you. So I'd say that we need to put a way bigger focus on like creating software and the value of software instead of lead code and memorization and so on. And again, no one cares. All that matters is the value in your software. No one cares if Google is run on a potato. The only thing that they care about is if it works. It's like at some hackathons. You know, these hackathons where they have absolutely like no technical panel and it's just like some randoms judging you. And you can make whatever promises you want and everything will be fine. You know, the most important thing is that you promise the best software and you make like the best presentation. It doesn't matter if it's economically infeasible, if it's just infeasible in general. People don't care how it works. All they care about is the value. And I think we have to try more to extract this value, to identify where users see value, to talk to people in industry if we want ideas for our projects, just basic software projects, just basic back and front end projects. We just need to talk to people in the industry and see what they need, what they think is useful software, and also look at some of the examples in the industry. I bet there's some software you can look at it and just based off of how it looks, you could probably get people to switch over to whatever version you create. It's going to be a great exercise in just like, project management and cloning a complicated app. But if you just make something that has more intuitive controls and just looks better, I think, and is probably cheaper because you're not hiring like a whole company. Um, I think a lot of companies actually have an incentive to switch over to your version of the software. So also something that you have to realize is that no one cares if you if you overpromise. Your app can literally be a wrapper for, or yeah, no one cares what tech is running. Leak code is kind of the anti, like the what do you call it? You call it the antithesis. I'll probably antithesis. I forgot how to pronounce that, but it's basically the exact opposite of this whole um, thing that I'm talking about, concerned with value, because lead code cares about stuff that no one cares about. Lead code cares about the O n squared, and that is very important. But at the end of the day, the consumers never see that. The consumers don't care. Your app, so many startups these days are just arguably open AI wrappers. And what do they what do they get? They get a lot of funding. They get a lot of success. And I think a lot of the people in these startups will just like fail upward. That is, they've done something, and that's always going to be recognized. There's a difference between being a dropout and, oh, I dropped out to found a company, but it didn't really work out. Hmm? I cooked there, and that's true. Yeah. So, and on top of that, and on top of that, investors, and on top of that, a further example, even in startups, you can overpromise and underdeliver, and you're still going to end up a billionaire. No one cared how Tesla worked. No one cared if it's vision or LiDAR or whatever it was. All they cared about was, did it work? And I mean, it worked. Yeah, it worked. And you see, look at Tesla now, like literally worth a lot, arguably way more than it should be. So here's my challenge for you. Don't wait to lock in. Don't say one more thing. Don't say this is the one. Just create something, do something. That's it. It doesn't have to be your magnum opus. It doesn't have to be the greatest piece of software that was ever written. Let's bring the bar down a bit. Of course, the bar these days is higher. The bar has been raised on all of us. But if you think about 2000, the whole .com bubble, the bar was kind of low. I mean, Elon made millions off of a His first startup was like off of a map app. I'm not saying that the implementation isn't like extremely difficult. For sure, I bet the implementation was not trivial at all. And I think even with Facebook, I bet the implementation it wasn't trivial. Like you could probably do it, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was easy, especially when stuff get to scale. But these days, we like to somehow tell ourselves that we have to do the most difficult thing. No, there's so much software to be created. There's so much value for you to create. Just step outside and do so.